All right, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to you in the name of His Son, Jesus. I count it truly a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to preach the word of God, and never don't count it as a light thing to do so. All right, brothers and sisters, we just got done with questioning, well, actually, question and answer, but our Wednesday night study, and it's been going well. We've been dealing with the four Gentile kingdoms, and it's a blessing. Is there something that you would like to listen to and see some edification according to what thus saith the Lord? That personal meeting ID number for that Zoom meeting is 845-710-8849, and that's every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Just got done. Kind of had a lesson after the lesson. But nevertheless, I want to continue here very briefly dealing with how we know this God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is a true and living God. You know, and I mentioned in the meeting we had tonight that I was, prior to the meeting, I was listening to someone and who didn't understand what the Bible was saying, but at the same time scoffing and mocking at what thus saith the Lord. And I was just like, it was vexing because the person he was asking didn't really understand. Well, she knew. It was actually a sister, and he's asking her these questions, and she said, "I'm not a biblical scholar, but he's picking out things and not really understanding that he doesn't know what he's talking about, but it seems plausible, especially when you don't want to believe." So it was a bunch of mocking and scoffing. But the way that you know he's God, and peace to everybody that's listening, the way that you know he's God is that the person he was dealing with, I don't know if he was an Egyptologist, I don't know what his school of thought was, his school of philosophy is, but nevertheless, none of them tell the end from the beginning. And that's what the Lord does. And I'm just showing very blatant, in your face examples of this, and there are many in the Bible. Okay. And that's why I know this book is real, and that anything you got, like I got somewhere around here, I had a Quran, and back in there, I got the Book of Mormon, these other books, as far as people who will say these are books of God, or these are divine books, I say they're comic books. But nevertheless, this is Isaiah the 46th chapter, because how do you know God is God? I'm going to read it again. I read it yesterday, but I'm going to read it again. It says in verse 9, Isaiah 46:9, "Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying my counsel shall stand and I will do all my pleasure." That's how you know he's God. I talked about how Isaiah tells of Cyrus, and that gives his name long before he's even born, before he comes into existence, and tells what this man is going to do. And you can line it up with history, because you know what? He came and did that very thing. It's so much prophecy in the book, but you got it to the point where they're caught. And it's not some vague, some Nostradamus, could be, woulda, coulda, shoulda. It is, I'm going to say his name and tell you what this man is going to do before he's even born. He did that with Cyrus, and then we go to the word, and we see also the same thing with one of Israel's greatest kings. One of Israel's greatest kings. And that's none other than King Josiah. Let's go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings, the 13th chapter. And I look at the kings, and I love, peace to MC Israel. It's good to see you there. I look at the kings of Israel. Most of them were wicked, and there are some that I love to read about, because they stood firm and they were righteous, and they a lot of times they were up against tremendous odds. When you read about the greatest king Israel ever had, none other than David, and what he was up against in his life, and he kept pushing. He was, to the best of his ability, trying to be righteous in every case, and on the same time he was a mighty warrior. And he was a wise man. He had the spirit, had a mind like God. It's a beautiful thing to read about David, to read the Psalms that he wrote. I also like reading about this king here, King Josiah. But let's read something here. We're in First Kings, the 13th chapter, and we'll pick it up at verse 1. First Kings 13:1. It reads, "And behold, there came a man of God out of Judah." So he's the prophet. "By the word of the Lord unto Bethel. And Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense." So we know Jeroboam was a wicked king. He came up after the kingdom was split after Solomon's death. Rehoboam reigned in the south. Jeroboam reigned in the north. And Jeroboam made the golden calves, and then because he was afraid that the people would go back up to Jerusalem to worship. And he came up with, he set up one in Bethel and one in Dan, and he said, "These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of Egypt." He said, "Oh, that same lie I was told before, denying the true and living God." But nevertheless, it says, as he stood there, it says in verse 2, "And he cried," this man of God, "and he cried against the altar in the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David." Then it says something, "Josiah by name. And upon thee shall he offer the priest of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. And he shall give a sign the same day, saying, This is the sign which the Lord hath spoken. Behold, the altar shall be rent, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out." Now we should understand that First Kings, the book of First Kings, was written approximately between 561 and 538 BC. Let's go to Second Kings. Let's go to Second Kings, and we're going to go all the way to Second Kings, the 22nd chapter. This is many years later, and let's see what happens. Second Kings 22, and we'll pick it up at verse 1. It says, "Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adiah of Boskoth." So now he reigned 31 years, and he reigned from approximately 639 to 609 BC. And what was his name? His name was Josiah. Okay, so that's when he reigned. But now let's see what he did. This is right in the next chapter, chapter 23 and verse 1. It says, "And the king," referring to Josiah, "sent, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem. And the king went up into the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him. And the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great, and he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord." You know, it could be speculated in one way, shape, or form it was lost. Clearly, the way of righteousness was lost for this people by this time. They were going on the wrong path in the days of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Actually, you know, Solomon was even building these edifices to these false gods. But it says, "And the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book, and all the people stood to the covenant." One thing about Josiah that I really just love, really have affinity for, is the fact that Josiah he's a reformer. And I really love this because I look at our people today, and we are in desperate need of reformation. We are in desperate need of a spiritual revolution, turning back to our God. You know, and he set the people back on the right course, in the right direction. So that's one thing I love when I love reading about Josiah. Peace to you, Sister Miss J. So that's one of the things that I love about him. So it says, "And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest and the priest of the second order and the keepers of the door to bring out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal and for the grove and for all the host of heaven. And he burned them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel." See, so it got so bad that even in God's temple, where the presence of God was there when it was dedicated, as it called the Shekinah glory, filled the house at the dedication of the temple. When Solomon made the prayer to that temple, they were putting idols in the temple. So in verse 5, I'll read 5 again. And he put down well, actually, I'll read verse 5. I haven't read it yet. And he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burn incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the host of heaven. See, they had these false priests. And it says, some peace to you, Brother Joseph, and it says something else. And he break down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the woman wove hangings for the grove. And oftentimes people read the Sodomites and say, you should have some people that were homosexual by the temple. No, more than likely, they were engaging in temple prostitution. Because that type of prostitution was associated with the idolatry. This is how far Israel had fallen. It says, and he brought all the priests out of the cities of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, and from Geba to Beersheba, and break down the high places of the gates that were in the entering and the gate of Joshua the governor of the city, which were on the man's left hand at the gate of the city. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places came not up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they did eat of the unleavened bread among their brethren. And he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Molech. Again, Israel had gotten so bad that they had idols in the temple. They had idolatrous priests. They had homosexual temple prostitution. They had those sodomites set up shop right next to the temple. And in addition, they were sacrificing their children to the false god Molech. That would say Israel, who was to be a kingdom of priests, had fallen so low, and they were in desperate need of a reformation. And that's what Josiah is doing. Right? That's why I say he's one of the greatest kings. And he took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun. So when he says that, it's this idea that they were hooked on these chariots and these horses. It'd be like symbolically they would drag and or across the sun, pulling the sun, But again, that's symbolic. At the entering of the house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan Melech, the chamberlain, which was in the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire. Good. Verse 12. And the altars that were on the top of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made. In the two courts of the house of the Lord did the king beat down, break them down from thence, and cast the dust of them into the brook Kidron. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile. And he brake in pieces the images and cut down the groves and filled their places with the bones of men. Okay. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, both the altar and the high place, he brake down and burned the high place and stamped it small to powder and burned the grove. 16. And as Josiah turned himself, he spied the sepulchres of the graves that were there in the mountain, and sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres and burned them upon the altar and polluted it according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. See, we read it in 1 Kings, right? 13, about what this one whose name was Josiah was to do. And Josiah, a man came, named Josiah, king, and did exactly what it said. Again, 1 Kings was written approximately 561 to 538 BC. Josiah reigned from approximately 639 to 609 BC. So see the time frame there. Now, some would say that this particular incident took place in 622. But nevertheless, we understand that he came on the scene and was prophesied of coming on the scene and named, and he was named. His name was given, and it was told that what he would do. And so he burned these bones on his altar. in verse 16, and as Josiah turned himself, he spied the sepulchres that were in the mount and sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres and burned them upon the altar and polluted it, because that would desecrate those altars. Like when you see in certain instances where they make some of those false altars latrines symbolically, right? Just to show disdain and disrespect for the false worship. It says again, and polluted it according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. Then he said, what title is that I see? And the men of the city told him, it is the sepulchre of the man of God, which came from Judah, and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel. And he said, let him alone, let no man move his bones. So they let his bones alone with the bones of the prophet that came out of Samaria. All right, so that's just, again, and the Bible is right, it is just full of instances of this. You can go to Genesis and read about Jesus. He's telling the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. I want to remind you that we have the Household of Faith meet every Sabbath at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Gary, Indiana at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel, as well as at www.israelteach.org. If you've been edified through the ministry or would like to leave a donation, and we truly appreciate when you do, you can go to our website, www.israelteach.org. 100% of the proceeds go to the work of the ministry. We have Bible study every Wednesday night. Again, like I said, we had it actually not that long ago, 20 minutes or so ago. Peace to you, Brother Willie. I see you there. Good to see you again. Peace to everybody that's listening. Hebrew Princess, Noel, Brother Noel. It's good to see you there, brother. Lawson, peace to you. Sister Sharon, MC Israel. Miss J, peace to you. Brother Joseph, good to see you there again. Brother Willie and CP, much love to you as well. We have Bible study every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on Zoom, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the personal meeting ID number is in the description of this video, but I'll just say it. It's 845-7108-8849. Again, that number is 845-7108-8849. That's 7 p.m. Central Standard Time every Wednesday. We have a Friday night Bible study class on Zoom, and that is a question and answer. And that personal meeting ID number is 602-961-1318. Again, 602-961-1318. And that is on Friday night at 8 p.m. Standard Time. And finally, brothers and sisters, there are books that I've written that are available on Amazon and other places where books are sold. Into Egypt Begin with Ships, The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays, Hair Like Wool, Feet Like Burned Brass, The Color of Jesus and Burning Truths Concerning the Messiah, Killing Black Innocence, For Then Shall Be Great Tribulation, In Defense of Biblical Polygyny, and The Feast Days, A Shadow of Things to Come. So those are available there. And with that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer that you are edified.